Fright Night Vault. Audio horror for nighttime listening.
Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. The boy had always been a restless sleeper. His parents would find him tangled in sheets, whispering through clenched teeth, sometimes sitting bolt upright with eyes wide open but not awake. It was unnerving, yes, but not unheard of. Children grow out of such things. That's what they told themselves. Until one morning when the mother entered his room and found him hanging in the air, 2 meters above the bed, suspended like a marionette with invisible strings, his body limp, his head tilted back, mouth open in silence. The blankets below him were untouched, neatly smoothed, as though he had never lain in them at all. He descended slowly, with no sound, no warning, gently placed back upon the mattress as though nothing had happened. When his eyes opened, they were his own, or seemed to be. Doctors called it sleep paralysis, night terrors, stress, but the family knew better. They had seen the way the shadows bent toward him, the way the temperature dropped when he entered a room. They had seen his lips move when no voice came out, and heard whispers in the walls answering back. The house felt changed now, not haunted by something outside, but by something inside him. The family turned to faith when medicine failed them. Priests, healers, and whispered names of those who knew old ways were called upon. Each promised deliverance, each left pale and shaken. Finally, an exorcist arrived. He was a gaunt man with eyes too tired to be surprised. He listened to the family's trembling accounts, then turned his gaze on the boy. The boy sat quietly, his face blank, though his fingers twitched in slow, deliberate rhythm against his knees, as if keeping time with some unheard music. The ritual was long and brutal. Holy words choked in the air as the boy convulsed. The lights flickered, the house shook, and at the height of it all he laughed. Not his laugh, not a child's, but a wet, rasping chuckle that clawed down the spine of every listener. And then it ended. The exorcist declared it done. The family collapsed into relief, clinging to hope, weeping with gratitude. The boy smiled faintly, exhaustion pulling him into sleep. For the first time in months, the house seemed calm. But calm is only ever the surface of deep waters. In the days that followed, the boy was himself again, eating, talking, laughing. Yet when he was alone, something else stirred. He felt it first as a hand against the back of his skull, guiding his gaze toward the corners where shadows pooled too thick. At night, the air grew heavy, pressing on his chest. Sometimes when he blinked, his reflection in the window didn't blink back. And then he realized he no longer heard the whispers when his family was near, only when the door closed, only when the house grew silent. The thing had not left. It had only learned patience. It began in secret. When the boy's parents left him alone, the silence thickened until it hummed in his ears. The air pressed down, then lifted as though the room itself inhaled. His limbs moved without his asking, twitching, stretching, until one night he found himself standing at the foot of his little sister's bed, watching her sleep. He didn't remember walking there. His toes barely touched the floor. The thing inside him no longer needed to make a spectacle. It slid in and out like a tide, subtle, precise. When his family entered the room, it buried itself deep, letting only the boy's trembling hands and wide eyes remain. But when the door shut behind them, it surfaced. It was clever now, wearing his face, but stretching it slightly wrong. Smiles too wide, eyes too still, voice that carried an echo. He stopped telling his parents what happened when he was alone. The first time he tried, the words came out in another tongue, guttural and sharp, filling the kitchen with a voice that wasn't his. His mother dropped a plate. His father refused to look him in the eyes for days, and so he bore it in silence. The thing laughed inside his chest, delighted by the game. It whispered of what it would do, not now, not tomorrow, but someday, when no one suspected, when trust was absolute. At night, he woke floating above his bed again, higher than before, his body rigid as though pulled on strings. His family would never see it. The entity made sure of that. It wanted the boy alone when it revealed its true form, alone when it sharpened its hold, alone when it decided he was no longer enough. The exorcist had been wrong. There was no cure, only waiting. The boy grew quieter with each passing day. His family told themselves he was recovering, that the ordeal had drained him, that his silence was a sign of healing. They wanted to believe it. They needed to believe it. But in solitude, the truth rotted. The nights became longer, stretching into endless vigils where the boy lay awake, listening to the thing crawl beneath his skin. Sometimes it pressed against his throat, forcing him to speak in its voice when no one was there to hear. Sometimes it yanked his limbs upward, lifting him in spasms that left him trembling. And sometimes, when he dared to look in the mirror, it gazed back at him with glowing eyes that weren't his own. He began avoiding his family. Meals at the table grew strained. His mother noticed he no longer laughed. His father found him standing in doorways at night, staring into the dark with an expression too empty to be human. His sister whispered that he talked in two voices when he thought no one was listening. Still, the family clung to denial. They told themselves the ritual had worked. The exorcist had said so. And who were they to doubt a man of God? But the boy knew better. He was never alone, not really. The entity had learned to hide when others were near, slipping back into his bones, pressing itself deep into the hollow spaces of his chest. The moment the room emptied, it emerged, stretching him like a puppet, making his tongue heavy with words he didn't understand. Weeks passed. He no longer knew which hours belonged to him and which belonged to it. Sleep came in fragments, broken by moments of levitation, moments of shadow figures crouching by his bed, moments where he could feel his own fingers curl around his throat. He begged it silently to stop. The thing only chuckled, its laughter rattling inside his skull. One night, he awoke standing in the kitchen, knife in hand, its point resting gently against the wooden table. He hadn't taken it. He hadn't walked there. His feet were bare, cold against the tiles. The knife trembled in his grip, not from his own fear, but from the pulse of something gleeful beneath his skin. He dropped it and ran, but the echo of laughter followed him back to bed. The more he resisted, the more it pressed. Sometimes it let him go just long enough to remember he was still human, just long enough to hear his sister's laugh, his mother's song, his father's tired voice. Then it would rise again, reminding him how thin the line had become. One evening, as he sat alone in his room, the door shut and the lights dim, it spoke clearly for the first time. "I don't need to stay inside you forever," it said, voice curling in his bones. "I only need to learn how to walk without you." And the boy realized the truth. The exorcist hadn't cast it out. He had only taught it how to wait. The family would never see the levitations again. They would never hear the whispers. To them, he was cured. But the boy knew. Every time he was left alone, the thing grew bolder, hungrier, practicing its exit. And someday, when the house was quiet, when no eyes were left to watch, it would step fully out. If you enjoy these types of horror audio stories, just add a like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you on the next one. Subscribe to be the first to hear it. We upload daily. If you have a story of your own, feel free to leave it in the comments below. You never know, the next story could be yours. See you on the next video.